Feel like status quo in your church is a wall that you just keep bumping up against when you would really like to see progress being made? Inspiring your church into deep change is what we're talking about this week. Stick around on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball, and I'm joined, as always, by AJ Matthew. And today we're brought to you by Faith Street. Faith Street is an iOS and Android app that brings congregations together. Faith Street is led by a team with roots in the Assemblies of God, the Vineyard, PCA, Anglican, non-denominational worlds. Listen, this is a tool that is built by church leaders for church leaders, and that's really important. So if you're looking for a tool that can build community in your church between Sundays and not just relying on those events, but really wanting to drive fellowship and generosity and mindfulness and promoting your teaching aspects and engaging in that throughout the week, check out Faith Street. Go to faithstreet.com/Malphurs. Get 20% off because you're one of our listeners. Faith Street, faithstreet.com/Malphurs, MALPHURS for 20% off. Check it out. All right, AJ. Oh man, yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, we've got to get churches off Facebook for well, I mean, not entirely, but
not today,
for building
anyway.
Community.
Yeah.
For building community,
right?
Let's use tools that are built for the church, right?
Yeah.
I think
is any church excited about Facebook at this point? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, Mark Zuckerberg is probably listening to us right now. He's monitoring our communications, so
he's a fan.
Let's just say, check out Faith Street, see if it's a good fit for you. All right. So today we're talking about challenging the status quo. Ooh. AJ, have you ever encountered a church that just didn't want to change, or met with a pastor who said, my church can't change?
Wow. Yeah. Let me count the ways. Let me count the times. Yeah. Or people on teams that are just pushing back and negative. Yeah. I mean, this is sort of related. I mean, we used to, we've both been doing this for many years now, Scott. And in the early years, it was not uncommon to see maybe strategic leadership team members that you knew going in, they were struggling with change, and the pastor is always like, in this, I have this conversation with almost every church I work with. They're like, hey, should I have Nancy or Philip on the team? We've really struggled to continue this relationship well, and they've been really, having a hard time. And it used to be like, yeah, let's have them on the team, like the major planning team. And anymore, it's like, no, because and we're going to get to this in number 4, they weren't good faith investors in change. Yeah. And so this is a problem that churches experience. I mean, because we're humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. We live in a fallen world. We're sinful. We all are. And change is difficult. Doing things differently is difficult. And so, I mean, we'll get to, again, in number 4, we're going to get to this little setup that I'm giving us, but every pastor knows exactly what we're talking about in people that become barriers to change. And we talk about this also in our training. What are barriers to change? Well, people's one of them.
People's number one. Yeah. And the status quo is almost like a wall around, a wall between where you are and where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And there's just no way to move forward as a church without pushing through that barrier of the status quo and really ramming through that wall. And so today we want to put some tools in your toolbox that you could use to sort of chisel away at that wall of the status quo and maybe get a breakthrough. Not maybe, definitely, if you were to do these things, achieve a breakthrough through the status quo so you can inspire deep change. I'm excited about this episode, AJ. We got 5 things. Let's hop in, AJ.
Let's do it. Number 1, define a mutually desirable outcome for change. This is a big one. And if you spent any time with us, we refer back to mission and vision a lot, but the benefit to defining a mutually desirable outcome for change is that you're leading, first of all, from a positive point of view. We've looked into the future to the greatest of our human abilities. We've discerned through the Holy Spirit what God wants our church to be doing where he has sovereignly placed us. And it's exciting. God doesn't do boring plans. God does exciting plans. And if that's where you're leading from in your church, you're going to already have most of the people with you. Yeah. And so this is always the place to start from. We just always say, always be leading from vision. Lead from vision. And this is what's going to develop unity in the church and is already going to give you that. This is that first hammer strike against the wall of status quo. And it's going to put a big crack in it. This is what is going to begin to weaken this and allow you to begin to push through the status quo by having a big vision impact that you want to make, leading from mission and vision, make disciples, making mature disciples of Jesus. And here's what that's going to look like in our church, in our community, our neighborhood, our city, around the world. This is that first strike against the status quo.
It sounds so fundamental and basic, right? But most churches that we encounter don't have this.
That's true.
They just don't. They don't have a shared dream.
Yeah, there you go.
That's the problem. The pastor has a dream, maybe, but it's not a shared dream. It's not one that everyone, and that's why this is worded the way that it is. It's a mutually desirable outcome for the change. That maybe not everybody. The majority of people are excited about that change and go, yeah, I would like to see that happen. And that's going to be different based on where your church is at, geographically, or where you're at just in terms of the culture of your church or whatever. But it's got to be something. It can't just be you, the pastor's dream for the future.
Right.
That's often the problem. It has to be a mutually desirable outcome for change.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't want you to miss that aspect of vision. It's not that you just need to have vision. It needs to be a shared vision, one that the majority of people go, yes, I see that. I want to go to that. I was meeting with the church yesterday. We were talking about this, and I was talking about how it's not enough to say, if you're having a little family meeting, hey, we're going on a road trip. Everyone could go, yeah, that would be great, right? So that'd be like saying, hey, as a church, we want to grow. Okay, yeah, that would be great. But that's too generic. That's not specific enough. So if we say within the road trip idea, AJ, someone wants to go to the beach and someone wants to go to the mountains, well, those are 2 very different trips. If you're starting from the Metroplex there in Dallas, driving towards the beach and driving towards the mountains, it's two very different routes, right? You got to be clear. It's got to be mutually desirable. Well, if you want beaches and mountains, maybe you got to be driving to Southern California. Like that's the road trip you need to take, right? So you need a mutually desirable outcome for change. That vision has to be shared. Don't miss that point for number 1.
Absolutely. That leads us to sort of, the other side of this coin now in number 2, and that's quantify the cost of not changing. And we have put these in this order of number 1 and number 2 for a reason. We just talked about the benefits of leading from a mission vision perspective in number 1. Well, the other side of that coin is that where we are today doesn't look like what we want to see it tomorrow. We're starting from a different place than where we want to end up. It's the other side of that coin. So we can't talk about what does tomorrow look like, this better future, without talking about what does it look like right now. And it might be kind of ugly. We don't want to stay where we are, and we can't if we want to go somewhere new. And so, so we have to do this. We still have to quantify the cost of not changing. What are we giving up by maintaining the status quo? Or even, worse, what will continue to be negative or get worse? How much
Right.
loss will we have? Maybe your church is declining, and the status quo. I tell you what, we've talked about this, Scott. I love how you've said this before. There's really the myth of status quo is that nothing ever does actually stay the same. So if you say we're just not going to change, what you're actually doing is agreeing that whatever negative path you're on that's the glide slope you'll continue down.
That's right.
Got to quantify the cost of not changing. What's the opposite? What's the negative side of us not pursuing a big, exciting mission and vision in our church? And this is the reality check, right? That a lot of people need to, see in front of them to understand the contrast, right? And we use this all the time in the church with the bigger I see God as for who he actually is, the smaller I see myself as, or the bigger my sin becomes when I look at this holy God. Same thing with our vision. How bad do we now see ourselves when we see how much better we could be? Is that making sense, Scott?
Yeah. I mean, I will often tell churches that, like you said, that the status quo is a myth. Things are changing. And so the choice then isn't between change and not change. It's, do I want to be a victim of change? So it's external and it's happening to me. Or do I want to have a voice in change where I can actually affect the outcome of what's coming? Yeah. And so now all of us live underneath the sovereignty of God. Nothing is going to happen to us, and we are not going to achieve anything that is outside the scope of what he has seen. We understand that. And yet God has invited us to play a role in it. And how those things interact obviously is a mystery none of us fully understand. But we can choose to be a victim, or we can choose to have a voice and change. And so we're advocating that it would be better to have a voice in it than to be a victim of it. And just like if you're standing in the middle of Dallas, you'll never smell an ocean breeze, right? That's just the fact. If the shared dream is to, head to the beach, it's not possible for you to feel that ocean air and get that smell, that ocean water, and get that fresh seafood so long as you're standing in the middle of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There is a cost of not changing. There's a cost of not getting in the car and starting that trip. And you need to, a key word here is quantify that. So there are certain groups of people where you can appeal to the emotion, AJ, where you could say, you're not going to feel that ocean breeze. You're not going to be able to smell that water. Like, you can make that emotional appeal. Some people, you're going to need to make a quantifiable appeal.
Yeah.
We have decreased in attendance by 10% over the last 2 years. If this trend continues, we will not have the funds to do X, Y, Z. And the things that you care most about in the church are not going to be sustainable either, because we won't be able to fund them. Right. So there are a certain subset of people, AJ, that those emotional appeals are not going to work on them.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to provide some facts and logic as well.
Yeah.
To show why, irrefutably, not changing has a cost.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of good leadership, is recognizing those two primary groups that you could probably put most people into, in addition to more granular view of just how people receive information and how they process.
And one's not more valid than the other.
Right.
They're both true.
Yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah. But you need to be able to come at the problem with both the emotion and the facts.
There you go. Number 3, you were kind of jumping into number 3 here just a little bit already, Scott, but have a bias for participation over discussion. People getting engaged in the change instead of planning out like, all right, we've got 3 town halls planned over the next 6 months so we can gather information. Well, I'm coming at you with number 3 with a bit of a prerequisite, an understood prerequisite. And that is that you, as a church leader, have a pretty good idea on the pulse of the church, and that you are able to maybe even demonstrate that back in the words that you use. If you can demonstrate that back, you can reduce the number of town halls that you need to have on any particular change by simply speaking to those things. If you can say, here's what we want to do. Here's the problem. And now I know some of you are thinking this, or now I know it's been said, if you can get that out there and people, because immediately they're like, what about? And then you checking off that box for them. They're like, okay, they can sit back in their chair again, they'll give you 5 more minutes to keep talking. But participation in making the change, that's the big point here, gives people a way to now invest in something. Maybe they were on the fringe. Maybe you got them involved a little bit. They're like, okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give you a chance. But if you can get them now working, I mean, with their hands and feet and contributing with their minds and their talents and their gifting, that's where you're going to start to see them really become now advocates for change.
Yeah. I'll do a little plug for the church ministry analysis that we do. I mean, that's an opportunity to get some feedback from people who would know, right? So when we do a church ministry analysis, we're not doing a survey with the whole church, but we are doing a survey with some key folks within your church, maybe 35, 40 people. It depends on the size of the church, how large this group is, which is only $99, by the way. You can go to malforsgroup.com/CMA if you want to check that out.
$99, Scott?
It's only $99, AJ. Yeah. At any rate, so there is a role for discussion and to get some feedback and to get some of that. But if you want to achieve change, it's best to have a bias for that participation, engaging more people in the process of owning the change. And this is the difference oftentimes, AJ, between committees and teams. Mm-hmm. Committees get together for the purpose of discussing problems versus teams. If you go back to last week's episode and where we talk about strategic implementation and planning rhythms, teams gather together for the purpose of execution and implementation and achieving things and working on things and doing things. So if you can engage more people in that process of doing change, of achieving change, implementing change versus just having avenues for discussion, you're going to have a much better outcome. I told you this, AJ, off air before we started. I have found that if I cook something, I'm less critical of it. Right? Like if I cook the burger and it's maybe a little bit charred or something, I didn't get it quite right, I'm going to be less critical than if I were to go to a restaurant and it's a little charred. I'm going to go, oh, this is a little charred. So if everyone in your congregation is a critic, it might be because you've not created enough on-ramps for participation. They're less likely to be critical of the change if they have an opportunity to participate in it. And so, yes, create opportunity. And if you're doing strategic envisioning, our process, we have clear on-ramps for participation that don't put too many, where you don't have too many chiefs and not enough Indians, right? Is that can you say that anymore? Is that a thing that you can say in 2021?
Probably not.
If that was offensive to anybody, I'm sorry. But you want to make sure that you got enough people who are doing and not just people who are talking. Okay, move on to number 4.
Number 4, invest minimal attention in bad faith detractors. So sort of that setup that I had there at the beginning of the show, investing into people that they don't in good faith really want to see change happen, even though it's uncomfortable for them. And every church has these people. It's just it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality. It needs to be recognized right from the beginning. And you want to make every effort to bring people along, but at some point you have to sort of cut that off and understand that the best use of your time is in continuing to move forward with the biggest team possible of people that are excited about change, or at least willing participants, and not giving the temper tantrum people too much time and attention.
Yeah. Oh, you're so well said, AJ. What you can't have happen is people get the impression that the way to get their way is to throw a temper tantrum, that's the way to get attention from leadership, and that's the real way for change to happen, is just to be vocal. And so this is, I hate to, it's maybe a bit of a harsh analogy, but when my daughter, who is 6 and she is great at throwing a fit. It's really good. And so, I used to, when she was younger, we'd put her in timeout or whatever. But as she's gotten a little bit older, I don't really do that anymore. What I will do, though, is I pick her up, AJ, and I put her in her room, and I leave the door open, and I don't give her a time limit. I just let her know, hey, whenever you're ready to come down and have and we can work something out, you're welcome to come downstairs. So I don't tell her, oh, you got to be up here for 6 minutes or whatever. I don't do that. I just, when you're ready to come down and we can work something out, great. But so long as she's throwing a fit and screaming or whatever, that's a bad faith discussion. If anything, I'm just trying to get her to be quiet, right? I'm not doing something because it's what's in her best interest or my best interest or our family's best interest. It's just that she'll stop crying. That's not a good way to make decisions. So the same thing in your church. When you're making decisions just so that someone will stop complaining, or just so that they'll keep tithing, or just so that they won't leave, or just so they won't rant about you on Facebook, those are not good motivations for having a discussion, AJ.
Yeah.
You have to explain when you're ready to have a good faith discussion about how we can move forward. Fantastic.
Yeah.
But so long as you're going to behave in this way, there's nothing that we can talk about.
Yeah. There's still ways of handling these situations in love and with respect. And if you're not sure you're good at handling those kinds of situations with love and respect, maybe get a little input from somebody else. Some of us a little lower on the EQ scale, maybe might be a little too harsh for some people, but
I actually think it requires a higher degree of EQ to handle those situations well. But
so
yeah,
maybe get
someone who's not going to lose sleep over conflict.
Yeah,
for sure.
Too bad. All right, bye. No. Okay, number 5. Draw maximum attention to progress. And this is a fun and exciting piece, and it's so often forgotten or pushed to the side or not given the credit that it's due. And it's so great. I love being at a church on a Sunday morning in which and it only takes 30 seconds, maybe a minute of your time to have somebody come up and talk about maybe changes that are in the process of implementation in the church, or some exciting thing that's happened. At least get into the habit maybe of talking about missions results or something. That's a great place to start, even if you don't have any change initiatives happening right now. Mm-hmm. I love hearing from a missionary, or at least a missionary report, or something that the church has participated in, and what the cool or awesome results were of it. This is a great way to continue to keep the vision in front of people, show that progress is being made, incite participation. I mean, it's just an awesome thing, and it doesn't take that much.
Yep. No, what it takes is intentionality, which goes back to last week's episode. So again, go back to listen to what would it be, episode 85.
Yeah.
But we tend to just get into the groove, AJ, of doing whatever. And so if you're going to highlight something that's happened that's cool, you have to really think through that and plan it out. I love when churches film videos celebrating something that's happened in the past. Obviously, that takes time. You've got to get whoever you're going to interview or whatever, and you got to film it. But that gives it reach. You can post it on Facebook, or on Faith Street. You could share it on.
I see what you did there, and that's
you're
a skilled host, Scott Ball.
faithstreet.com/Malfers, get 20% off. But no, in all seriousness, you want to are trying to draw a contrast here, AJ, between point 4 and point 5. Point 4, we're saying invest minimal attention in bad faith detractors. You have to deal with it, but you don't want to, give it more attention than it deserves. Mm-hmm. Whereas number 5, draw maximum attention to progress, even if it's small. Maybe especially if it's small. If it's something that most people would overlook, those are the kinds of things you want to highlight and go, this is making a big difference. This is making an impact.
Yeah. Yep.
So important.
Man, and a home run on number 5 is when you've had a good faith detractor, somebody that wasn't on board, but saw positive change, had a desire for positive change, and maybe even had a change of perspective, you bring them into number 5, drawing attention to the progress, and they're the ones speaking it. Home run. I've had this happen on SLTs, Scott. I don't know if you have or not, but somebody that maybe they were like not too sure about this. And then it clicks for them and they're like, I got what we're doing here. And I've had this happen on several occasions where they go off on like a little mini speech talking about the positivity, and everybody in the room is like, I can't believe he just said that. Well, look at where we started with, and in every case, it's like, oh my gosh, I wish we were recording that, because that would have been a great Sunday morning video. So man, leader, pastor, whoever is watching this right now, keep your eye and your ears tuned for these things, because those are awesome. There'll be plenty of people that can say good things about what's happening, but if you could find a really impactful person, that's even better.
Absolutely. So let's recap this, AJ. We got five things you can do to inspire deep change, to break through the status quo. Number 1, you need to define this. We're leading from vision, right? We're defining a mutually desirable outcome, and that mutually desirable outcome is key. It's got to be a vision that is shared. It's not just your vision as the pastor. That's an opportunity for conflict. It has to be a shared dream for the future. Number 2, quantify the cost of not changing. There's an actual cost, there's an opportunity cost, there's a financial cost, there's a human resource cost, there's an eternal cost. That's right, of not changing. And you need to be able to express that both emotionally and factually to the folks in your congregation. Number 3, you need to have a bias for participation over discussion. The little struggle sessions in town hall meetings, you need a small avenue to get good feedback. And I would recommend the church ministry analysis, because it's third party. It's going to be more objective. It's going to be more structured. But the constant let's get together and have 15 committee meetings and all that's just not helpful. It's not productive. So have a bias for participation, giving people ownership in the change and not just opportunities to talk about change. Number 4, invest minimal attention in bad faith detractors. Most people who are afraid of change are not operating in bad faith, but some people are. You need some degree of emotional intelligence to be able to see the difference between people who don't understand and people who are operating in bad faith. Those who are operating in bad faith don't award their squeakiness with grease. You have to kind of let them know that when they're ready to operate in good faith, you can invite them to participate in the change. And then finally, draw maximum attention to progress, even if it's small, maybe especially if it's small, and maybe especially if you can draw attention to folks in the congregation who maybe would have been in a people who were maybe opposed to change, but now are engaging in that change, and not the usual suspects. People expect to hear the progress from you as the pastor, but if they hear it from Sally or they hear it from John, it makes a big impact. And so change, AJ, let's wrap this up this way. Change is not something that I think we can expect reasonably to happen overnight.
No.
And sometimes we set ourselves up for failure by assuming that change can happen that quickly. And something I've heard you say, and I think we've both said it several times in different circumstances, but you didn't get where you are overnight, and so you can't expect to get somewhere different overnight. Yeah, it's going to take time.
Most positive things are slow. A lot of negative things might be fast. Overnight, you could lose the roof off the building because of a tornado, or or a fire. There's a lot of bad things that can happen really quickly. The good stuff usually takes time.
That's right, and it's worth it. You have to embrace the fact that it's worth investing the time in. We've talked about this on the podcast in some recent episodes. I've been doing some health stuff, AJ, and I don't see every day necessarily the progress I'm making in my health stuff, right? But I do see it when I look back to when I started
Mm-hmm.
and go, wow, what a difference, right? I mean, you could probably go back, listener, and go back to episodes in January and screenshot me. I mean, I think hopefully people can tell, hey, I've been lost a couple LBs, right? But that's not the point. The point is I feel better. But you have to take the commitment to the journey. If how I felt in the first couple of weeks was how I was going to judge the whole process, I would have stopped. And when you start a change process, AJ, you're going to encounter the most opposition to that change in the first 6 months of that.
Yeah.
And if you can push through that and not capitulate and not compromise, but really move forward and build consensus and do the things we've talked about, AJ, it's going to be worth it. But you have to be willing to push through the change in the first 6 months.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I've seen. That if the churches that give up, it's a real bummer, and it's a waste for everybody. It's a waste for the kingdom.
It is. It is indeed. Yep. Keep your eye on the prize, folks.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, hey,
I like this one.
Yeah. Hey, you want to wrap us up? Give us the, where can they find the show notes for today?
Show notes are at malfirsgroup.com/86. That's what number episode this was. And so, yeah, you can read a little bit more in depth about each of these points. And of course, how you can get in touch with us if you'd like some help working with your church. And one last mention also, Scott, of our sponsor, Faith Street. You can find out more about them at faithstreet.com. That's FAITHSTREET.com. And if you throw the /Malphurs, MALPHURS on the end, you get 20% off. And I think you'll be glad you did that to help build fellowship and community and discipleship in your church. It would be well worth a look. Thanks, Scott.
That's right. Hey, thank you guys for joining us. We will see you next week with another great topic, actionable and applicable to your church as you look to make and mature more disciples. We'll see you next week. Bye.